When my 4-year-old son went missing, my ex-wife told police. He's an unfit father. Probably sold him for drug money. Officers believed him. My ex-wife's mother added, I always said he'd be the death of those kids. I just sat there, shaking. Then my 7-year-old daughter took a deep breath and said, Officer, should I show you where Mummy really hid my little brother? Police station went quiet. You know that feeling when you walk into a meat locker by accident? That bone-deep cold that makes your teeth want to chatter and your skin crawl up your arms looking for warmth? Yeah, well, that's exactly what this police station felt like, except instead of hanging beef, they had hanging accusations, and instead of butchers, they had cops who looked at me like I was already guilty of whatever crime du jour they were serving up today. I'm sitting on this chair that's apparently been designed by someone who really, truly hated the human spine. It's one of those molded plastic numbers that's supposed to be ergonomic, but really just means we found the exact angle that will make your lower back scream after 10 minutes. My hands are shaking in my lap like leaves in a hurricane, and I'm trying real hard not to let everyone in this fluorescent-lit nightmare see just how close I am to completely losing my shit. Because apparently, when you're a dad whose kid goes missing, the first thing everyone wants to do is figure out how it's your fault. Sabrina, my ex-wife, the woman who used to tell me I put too much milk in my cereal, is pacing back and forth across this linoleum floor like she's Perry Mason getting ready to deliver the closing argument that's going to send me up the river for life. She's got that look on her face, you know the one, that practiced expression of righteous indignation mixed with just enough fake concern to make the jury think she's the victim here. Her heels are clicking against the floor with this rhythmic tap-tap-tap that's drilling straight into my skull, and every few steps she throws me this look like I'm something nasty she just scraped off her shoe. And then there's Marjorie, Sabrina's mother, sitting there with her lips pressed together so tight they've practically disappeared. I swear, this woman could suck the joy out of a circus. She's got her hands folded in her lap, her back ramrod straight, and this expression on her face like she's sitting in judgment at the pearly gates, and I just showed up with a rap sheet longer than a CVS receipt. The woman has already convicted me, sentenced me, and probably planned my funeral, all without saying a word. But her eyes? Man, her eyes are doing all the talking, and they're saying things that would make a sailor blush. Officer Delgado is sitting behind this desk that looks like it was bought during the Carter administration, hunting and pecking at a keyboard with 2 fingers like he's defusing a bomb. Every few seconds, he looks up at me over these reading glasses that have probably seen more crime than a New York City street corner, and I can practically see the wheels turning in his head. He's got that cop look-down pad. You know, that quick assessment where they size you up, categorize you, and decide whether you're worth their time or just another piece of human debris that washed up on their shore. His expression says he's already made up his mind. And spoiler alert, it's not looking good for the home team. That's when Sabrina drops her little verbal bomb. Calm as you please, like she's ordering coffee instead of trying to destroy what's left of my life. He's an unfit father, she says, and her voice has this practiced quality to it, like she's been rehearsing this line in front of her bathroom mirror. But then she goes for the throat. Probably sold the boy for drug money. Just like that. Boom. No hesitation, no emotion. Just pure, calculated cruelty wrapped up in concerned citizen packaging. And of course, Marjorie can't let a good character assassination go to waste, so she chimes in with her greatest hit. I always said he'd be the death of those kids. Now, this is rich coming from a woman who once forgot to pick up her own grandson from daycare because she was too busy getting her nails done, but apparently selective memory is a family trait on Sabrina's side. Here's the thing that's really screwing with my head. My son Owen is 4 years old. 4. He still needs help tying his shoes and sometimes forgets to flush the toilet, and now he's missing. Gone. Vanished like a magician's rabbit. Except this isn't some Vegas stage trick, and there's no Tata moment coming where he pops out of a hat with a big grin on his chocolate-smudged face. My daughter Lila, 7 years old and wise beyond her years in ways that break my heart, is sitting in the corner of this bureaucratic nightmare, holding onto her plush fox like it's the only real thing left in the world. She's small and silent, taking everything in with those big eyes of hers, and I can tell she's processing all of this adult insanity with the kind of clarity that only kids seem to have. You know how children can cut through all the bullshit and see right to the heart of things? That's Lila. She's always been like that. Too smart for her own good, my mom used to say. I keep trying to speak up, to defend myself, to explain that I love my kids more than life itself, and would literally walk through fire before I'd hurt them. But every time I open my mouth, my voice decides to go on vacation. It cracks and wobbles and makes me sound exactly like what everyone in this room already thinks I am. Guilty. There's something about being falsely accused that makes you sound guilty even when you're telling the truth. It's like the universe's cruelest joke. The more innocent you are, the more suspicious you sound trying to prove it. But then something happens that changes everything. Lila stands up. Just like that. This tiny 7-year-old girl stands up in a room full of adults who have already decided how this story ends, and she takes a breath that seems way too big for such a little chest. It's like watching David square up against Goliath, except David is 3.5 feet tall and carrying a stuffed fox instead of a slingshot. She looks straight at Officer Delgado, not at her mother, not at the grandmother who's been shooting me death glares for the past hour, but at the guy with the badge and the power to actually do something about this mess. And in a voice that's steady as bedrock, she asks, "Should I show you where Mommy really hid my little brother?" I swear to God, the entire police station went silent. And I mean silent, like someone had hit the mute button on reality. The printer that had been chattering away in the background suddenly stopped. The phones that had been ringing every 30 seconds went quiet. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to stop their incessant humming. It was like the whole world had just taken a collective breath and decided to listen to what this brave little girl had to say. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and for the first time since that empty swing started haunting my nightmares, hope came rushing back into my lungs like air to a drowning man. Because if there's one thing I know about Lila, it's that she doesn't lie. She doesn't embellish. She doesn't play games with the truth. When Lila says something, you can take it to the bank, cash it, and use the money to buy yourself some peace of mind. And right then, watching my 7-year-old daughter stand up to a room full of adults who had already written me off, I knew that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was about to end. You know what's really twisted about life? How it can serve you up the most perfectly ordinary morning, complete with burnt toast and cartoon sound effects, right before it drops a piano on your head like some sick Warner Brothers cartoon. That morning, God, that morning, was so ridiculously normal it should have come with a warning label. Caution, this mundane Tuesday is about to become the worst day of your life. I'm standing in our shoebox kitchen at 7:30 a.m., stirring a pot of oatmeal that's bubbling away like a science experiment. The stuff smells like cardboard mixed with hope, which is pretty much the breakfast of divorced dads everywhere. Owen's sitting at our wobbly table, the one I got from Craigslist for $40 because apparently furniture is a luxury when you're paying alimony and child support, swinging his little legs and making airplane noises with his spoon. "Daddy, I need more raisins," he announces, because 4-year-olds believe in abundance, especially when it comes to anything that remotely resembles candy. Like a million more raisins. Maybe 2 million. His hair's sticking up in 17 different directions, and he's wearing his favorite green dinosaur shirt that's got more stains on it than a mechanic's coveralls. Kid's been wearing that shirt twice a week since Christmas, and I've given up trying to convince him that variety is the spice of life. So I dump about half the box of raisins into his bowl, because why not? When you're a single dad trying to make up for the fact that your ex-wife is painting you as the villain in this whole divorce drama, you pick your battles. And if my kid wants to eat his weight in dried grapes, well, there are worse addictions in the world. Lila's at the other end of our tiny table, bent over one of those learn-to-read books with the patience of a monk and the concentration of a brain surgeon. She's sounding out words like each syllable is a puzzle piece that needs to fit perfectly into place. "Courage," she says slowly, her little finger following along under the letters. "Courage. That means being brave even when you're scared, right, Daddy?" And I'm thinking, yes, sweetheart, that's exactly what it means, and you're going to need a lot of it growing up in this crazy world. But instead I just ruffle her hair and tell her she's getting so good at reading that pretty soon she'll be helping me with my taxes. She giggles at that, because 7-year-olds think grown-up problems are hilarious instead of soul-crushing. That's when I make my brilliant joke about starting a breakfast restaurant. Wells Family Diner, I announce, waving my wooden spoon around like I'm conducting an orchestra. We'll serve the finest oatmeal this side of the Mississippi, with all the raisins your heart desires. Owen can be the head raisin distributor, and Lila can be the official book reader for customers who get bored waiting for their food. Owen claps his sticky hands together like I just announced we're going to Disney World. Can we really, Daddy? Can we have a restaurant? And Lila looks up from her book with this expression that's half excitement and half practical 7-year-old skepticism, like she's already wondering about health permits and business licenses. Our apartment is what real estate agents would call cozy, and normal people would call cramped. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a living room that doubles as a dining room, kitchen, home office, and indoor playground depending on the time of day. The furniture is a collection of hand-me-downs, garage sale finds, and desperate late-night Amazon purchases. Nothing matches, everything's slightly broken, but it's ours. More importantly, it's safe. And after 6 months of divorce proceedings that made Game of Thrones look like a friendly disagreement, safe felt like winning the lottery. We had plans that day. Real plans. The kind that don't cost much money but mean everything to a couple of kids who just want to spend time with their dad, without lawyers and court dates hanging over their heads like storm clouds. First stop, Riverside Green, the local park where the swings actually work and the sandbox doesn't look like a crime scene. Then the duck pond, where Owen likes to pretend he's a nature documentarian and Lila likes to count how many ducks she can spot. After that, maybe a slice of pizza from Tony's. The kind of place where they know your name and don't judge you for ordering 1 slice and splitting it 3 ways. I packed juice boxes into our beat-up backpack, the one I've been carrying since college that's held together with duct tape and determination. Apple juice for Owen because he's convinced it makes him run faster, and some fruit punch concoction for Lila because she likes drinks that are fancy colors. Simple pleasures, you know? The kind of stuff that makes you remember why being a parent is the best job in the world, even when it's also the hardest. Lila decided that Owen's sneakers needed decorating, so she spent 10 minutes applying stickers to his light-up shoes. Dinosaurs, stars, and what I think was supposed to be a rocket ship, but looked more like a deformed pickle. Now you'll run super fast, she told him with the authority of someone who clearly understands the aerodynamic properties of sticker application. Owen was thrilled, of course, because when you're 4, stickers are basically magic. While the kids were getting ready, I shot a quick text to my brother Gavin, asking how Dad's doctor appointment went. Pop's been having some health scares lately. Nothing too serious, but enough to remind us all that time isn't something you can take for granted. Gavin texted back almost immediately, all good. Doc says he's got the heart of a 30-year-old. Apparently a very lazy 30-year-old, but still. Classic Gavin, always ready with a joke to cut through the worry. For the first time in weeks. Hell, maybe months. I felt light. Actually light. Like someone had been slowly deflating my soul and finally decided to stop squeezing the air out of it. The kids were happy. We had a whole day ahead of us with no agenda except having fun. And for once, the phone wasn't ringing with some new piece of divorce-related drama. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, because I'm not psychic and I don't speak fluent manipulation, was that while I was making breakfast and planning our perfect ordinary day, Sabrina was across town filing an emergency motion with the family court. I didn't know she'd spent the previous evening crafting a narrative that would paint me as an unfit father who couldn't be trusted with a houseplant, let alone 2 kids. I didn't know she had a plan that was about to turn my simple Tuesday into a nightmare that would make Stephen King novels look like bedtime stories. I didn't know that my kindness, my trust, my basic human decency was about to be weaponized against me like some kind of emotional IED. But sitting there in that cramped kitchen, watching my kids be kids, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope that maybe, just maybe, we were all going to be okay. Riverside Green was doing its whole Norman Rockwell impression that Tuesday afternoon. You know, that picture-perfect American family paradise where nothing bad ever happens and the biggest drama is whether little Timmy gets pushed too high on the swing set. The place was packed with the usual suspects. Soccer moms power walking with strollers the size of small SUVs, golden retrievers chasing tennis balls like their lives depended on it, and a bunch of college kids pretending to study while really just working on their tans. There was this soccer game happening on the far field, And I could hear the coach yelling instructions that probably made sense to someone who understood the difference between offsides and off his rocker. Some guy with dreadlocks was sitting by the benches, tapping out a rhythm on his bongos that sounded like a heart with irregular beats. The whole scene had this lazy, everything's gonna be alright vibe that made you forget, at least for a minute, that the world outside the park gates was a complete dumpster fire. Owen took off toward the swings like he was being chased by dinosaurs, which in his 4-year-old imagination, he probably was. Higher, Daddy. Higher, he yelled before his, but even hit the swing seat. Kid's got priorities, I'll give him that. His little legs were pumping like he was trying to achieve liftoff, and those light-up shoes Lila had decorated were flashing like a disco ball having a seizure. Every time I pushed him, he'd let out this giggle that sounded like pure joy distilled into audio form, the kind of laugh that makes you remember why people have kids in the first place. Lila, meanwhile, had zeroed in on the monkey bars with the focus of a Navy SEAL planning a mission. She gets this look on her face when she's determined to conquer something. Jaw set, eyes narrowed, like she's staring down her greatest enemy and planning its destruction. It's the same expression she wore when she decided she was going to learn to ride her bike without training wheels, and the same one she had when she taught herself to tie her shoes because, and I quote, "I'm not a baby anymore, Daddy." She attacked those monkey bars like they'd personally insulted her family, hand over hand, her little arms straining, her tongue poking out the corner of her mouth the way it always does when she's concentrating. And here's the thing about Lila, when she's scared of nothing, she's absolutely unstoppable. Fear just doesn't compute in that kid's brain. She approaches challenges like they're puzzles waiting to be solved, not obstacles designed to defeat her. That's when my phone rang. Gavin's name popped up on the screen, and I figured he was calling with more details about Dad's doctor visit. Maybe some joke about how the old man tried to hit on the nurse or complained about the hospital coffee. You know, normal brother stuff. Normal family stuff. The kind of call that happens 1,000 times and never means anything more than, "Hey, how's your day going?" I stepped exactly 3 steps away from Owen's swing. 3 steps. I've replayed it in my head about 1,000,000 times. Just far enough to hear Gavin over the playground noise, but close enough to keep both kids in my direct line of sight. Owen was still swinging, still giggling, still being a perfectly normal 4-year-old who thought the world was his personal amusement park. Lila was halfway across the monkey bars, grunting with effort, but refusing to give up because giving up isn't in her vocabulary. The call lasted maybe a minute, probably less. Gavin was just checking in, making sure I was doing okay, asking if I needed anything. Standard big brother protocol. The guy's been looking out for me since we were kids, and old habits die hard. I told him we were having a great day at the park, that the kids were happy, that for once everything felt normal. He said he was glad to hear it, told me to give the kids a hug from Uncle Gavin, and that was it. Click. End of call. End of the last normal minute of my life. I hung up, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and turned around expecting to see Owen's gap-toothed grin and hear him demanding to be pushed higher, faster, until he could touch the clouds. Instead, I saw the swing moving back and forth, empty as a promise from a politician. You know that feeling when you're walking downstairs in the dark and you think there's one more step than there actually is? That split second when your foot hits solid ground, but your brain is still expecting another step, and your whole world just drops out from under you? That's what it felt like, except instead of just stumbling, I felt like the entire earth had decided to open up and swallow everything that mattered. The swing was still moving. That's what really messed with my head. It was still swinging back and forth with this gentle, hypnotic motion, like Owen had just jumped off and run to the bathroom, or something equally innocent and explainable. But Owen wasn't anywhere. Not on the slide. Not in the sandbox. Not hiding behind the little tunnel where kids like to play peekaboo with their parents. I started calling his name, trying to keep my voice calm because you don't want to be that parent who loses his shit and scares all the other kids. Owen, where are you, buddy? Like maybe he was just playing hide and seek and forgot to tell me we were playing. Like maybe this was all some elaborate 4-year-old joke that would end with him jumping out from behind a tree, yelling surprise, and wondering why Daddy looked like he'd seen a ghost. A mom with twins in a double stroller saw me looking around and asked if everything was okay. When I explained that I couldn't find my son, she immediately started helping, checking the restrooms while I searched behind every tree, under every bench, inside every possible hiding spot in a 50-yard radius. Her kids were asking why we were running around, and she told them we were playing a finding game, which was probably the kindest lie anyone's ever told on my behalf. This dad with a beer gut and kind eyes heard us calling Owen's name and started scouting the parking lot, checking between cars and looking under anything big enough to hide a 4-year-old. I described Owen's green dinosaur shirt, his light-up shoes with Lila's sticker decorations, his messy hair and chocolate-stained grin. The description that should have been enough for someone to say, "Oh yeah, I saw him by the duck pond 5 minutes ago," but nobody had seen him. Nobody had seen anything. Someone, I don't even remember who, called 911. Someone else called out to check if any other parents had seen a little boy in a dinosaur shirt. And me? I called Sabrina, because that's what you do when your world falls apart. You call the other parent and hope they have some magical explanation for why your child has vanished into thin air. Her first words weren't, "Oh my God, is he okay?" or "Where did you last see him?" or any of the things a worried mother should say when she hears her baby is missing. No, Sabrina's first words were an accusation wrapped in fake concern. "How do you lose a 4-year-old?" And that's when I knew this wasn't just about a missing kid anymore. You know what's really screwed up about the American justice system? How everything that actually matters, like whether your kid is safe, or if you're a good parent, or if you'd literally die before hurting your children, gets reduced to paperwork. Forms and files and official stamps that somehow carry more weight than the fact that I've been changing diapers and reading bedtime stories and kissing scraped knees for the past 7 years of my life. Officer Delgado's got me sitting across from this metal desk that looks like it was designed by someone who really enjoyed medieval torture chambers. The thing's covered in coffee rings, scratches, and what I'm pretty sure are tear stains from about 1,000 other people who've sat in this exact same chair, facing these exact same questions, wondering how their lives went from normal to nightmare in the space of a phone call. The questions start off routine, almost boring. What time did we arrive at the park? Did I notice anyone suspicious? Had Owen ever wandered off before? Standard missing kid protocol, the kind of stuff you see on TV cop shows where everything gets wrapped up in 43 minutes with commercial breaks. But then Delgado starts asking about my finances, my work schedule, my living situation, and I can feel the conversation shifting from concerned parent to prime suspect faster than a NASCAR pit stop. That's when Sabrina makes her grand entrance with what I can only describe as a performance worthy of a Tony Award. She slides this manila folder across the table like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, except instead of something cute and fuzzy, she's produced a collection of character assassination materials that would make Joseph McCarthy proud. The folder's stuffed with printouts, screenshots, and what she's calling documented incidents, which is a fancy way of saying she's been keeping a diary of every single time I've been human instead of perfect. There's a photo of Owen eating McDonald's for dinner, apparently evidence of poor nutritional choices, from the night I worked a double shift and picked him up at daycare at 8:30 p.m. There's a screenshot of a text where I joked about needing a vacation, which she's somehow twisted into proof that I don't want to be a father. She's highlighted stuff in yellow marker like she's studying for the bar exam. Except instead of learning law, she's perfected the art of making normal parenting look like criminal negligence. Every late pickup from daycare, because sometimes traffic exists and overtime happens, has been documented with timestamps. Every time I've had to work extra hours to pay the bills she helped create with this divorce, every moment of exhaustion or frustration that comes with being a single parent, it's all been cataloged and weaponized. "He threatened to take the children out of state," she announces to Officer Delgado, her voice carrying that perfect blend of wounded mother and concerned citizen. Which is hilarious, because what she's referring to is the time I mentioned that my brother Gavin lives in Colorado, and maybe someday it would be nice to visit Uncle Gavin and see some mountains. Apparently, wanting your kids to experience geography is now kidnapping with intent. Then she goes for the financial jugular. He's been unstable since losing his extra shifts. Now, here's the thing about losing extra shifts. It happens when companies cut costs, not when employees are unfit human beings. But in Sabrina's twisted version of reality, economic downturns are character flaws, and struggling to pay rent while also paying alimony is evidence of moral bankruptcy. But the real kicker, the piece de resistance of this whole dog and pony show, comes when she starts hinting about substances. She doesn't come right out and say I'm a drug addict. She's too smart for that, too careful about legal liability, but she drops little breadcrumbs about erratic behavior and concerning changes in appearance that are designed to plant seeds in Officer Delgado's head. What she's really talking about is the fact that I've lost weight since the divorce. Turns out stress and surviving on ramen noodles will do that to a guy. And maybe I've been drinking more coffee than usual because I'm working extra hours to keep my head above water financially. But when Sabrina tells it, suddenly I'm one step away from cooking meth in the garage and selling Owen's toys to fund my habit. Marjorie, meanwhile, is sitting there like the Greek chorus of doom, nodding along to every accusation like a dashboard bobblehead. He was never ready to be a father, she chimes in, her voice dripping with the kind of self-righteous satisfaction that comes from being proven right about something she's been wrong about for 7 years. I warned everyone this would happen. This is rich coming from a woman who once forgot to feed the kids dinner because she was too busy watching her stories on TV, but selective memory seems to be a family trait in the Turner household. According to Marjorie's revisionist history, I've been a walking disaster since day one, just waiting for the right moment to completely destroy my children's lives. Then Delgado slides another piece of paper across the desk, and my stomach drops into my shoes. It's an emergency custody petition filed yesterday, while I was making breakfast and planning our perfect day at the park, asking the court to immediately remove both children from my care and place them with their mother full-time. The language is brutal, clinical, designed to make me sound like a cross between Charles Manson and the worst parent who ever lived. They've highlighted phrases like ongoing neglect, failure to provide adequate supervision, and unsafe living conditions. The unsafe living conditions apparently refer to the time our hot water heater broke, and we had to take cold showers for 3 days until the landlord could fix it. You know, basic apartment living stuff that happens to normal people. There's a whole section about failure to provide adequate nutrition that seems to be based entirely on that McDonald's incident I mentioned earlier. Because apparently feeding your kids Happy Meals when you're exhausted from working 14 hours to keep a roof over their heads makes you an unfit parent, not a guy doing his best with limited resources. I try to respond to all this, to defend myself against this avalanche of twisted facts and weaponized ordinary moments. But here's the thing about being a man in a room full of people who've already decided you're guilty. Everything you say sounds wrong. If you're calm, you're cold and uncaring. If you show emotion, you're unstable and dangerous. If you try to explain, you're making excuses. If you stay quiet, your silence is obviously an admission of guilt. So I choose my words carefully, speaking slowly and deliberately, because I know that men who sound angry in rooms like this get railroaded faster than you can say domestic violence. I look Officer Delgado straight in the eye and say, I love my kids more than life itself. I would never, ever hurt them. But sitting there, surrounded by folders full of lies and accusations, listening to the woman who used to promise to love me forever systematically destroy my character with the efficiency of a paper shredder, my words sound small and inadequate. They sound exactly like what everyone in that room expects a guilty man to say when he's backed into a corner with nowhere left to run. You know what's funny about Glass? Not haha funny, but that twisted kind of irony that life likes to serve up when you're already choking on disappointment. Glass is supposed to be transparent, supposed to let you see clearly from one side to the other. But sitting in that police station, staring through the reinforced window into the children's interview room, I felt like I was looking through a fishbowl, watching my daughter's life get dissected by adults who thought they knew better than a 7-year-old what was real and what wasn't. Lila was sitting at this tiny table that probably came from the same government catalog as the torture chair I'd been planted in for the past hour. The thing was kid-sized, painted that specific shade of institutional blue that's supposed to be calming, but really just screams, this is where childhood innocence comes to die. Ms. Rivera, the social worker, was across from her with a voice softer than a church whisper and eyes that had probably seen every kind of family nightmare you could imagine. The woman had that practiced gentleness that comes from years of coaxing truth out of kids who've been taught that telling the truth gets people in trouble. Scattered across the table were crayons in every color of the rainbow, construction paper, and a few of those psychological assessment toys that look innocent but are really designed to unlock whatever trauma might be hiding in a kid's head. Lila had her plush fox clutched in her left hand, that ragged little thing she's had since she was 3, with one ear chewed off and stuffing coming out of its tail. She calls him Mr. Patches, and he's been her confidant through every storm life's thrown at her so far. But here's the thing about my daughter that most people don't understand. When Lila gets worried, really worried, she draws maps. Not pictures of houses with stick-figure families and yellow suns in the corner like most kids. Maps. Detailed, precise, almost obsessively accurate maps of places she's been, places she's going, places she needs to remember. It's like her brain processes stress by turning it into geography, creating order out of chaos by putting everything in its proper place on paper. So there she was, bent over a piece of construction paper with a purple crayon, drawing lines and shapes with the concentration of a cartographer mapping uncharted territory. Her tongue was poking out of the corner of her mouth, same as always when she's thinking hard, and every few seconds she'd pause, tilt her head like a curious bird, and add another detail to whatever mental landscape she was transferring onto paper. Ms. Rivera was being patient, letting Lila work through whatever process was happening in that brilliant little brain of hers, occasionally asking gentle questions that Lila would answer with a distracted hum, while never looking up from her drawing. The whole scene had this weird calm before the storm quality, like watching someone defuse a bomb by painting their nails. Then something shifted. I could see it in Lila's posture, the way her shoulders straightened and her grip on Mr. Patches tightened. She looked up at Ms. Rivera, then toward the glass where she probably couldn't see me but somehow knew I was there, and made a decision. You could literally watch her 7-year-old mind click into gear, like someone had just switched on a spotlight in a dark room. She stood up. Just like that. This tiny girl who barely comes up to most adults' waist stood up in a room designed to intimidate grown-ups and made the kind of choice that would make Gandhi proud. She walked over to the door with Mr. Patches tucked under one arm and her crayon map clutched in the other hand, and asked Ms. Rivera if she could go talk to the police officer. Ms. Rivera hesitated. You could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Protocol said keep the kids separated. Let the trained professionals handle the adult conversation. Don't traumatize the child any more than necessary. But there was something in Lila's voice, some quality of absolute determination, that made the social worker realize this wasn't a request. This was a 7-year-old announcing her intention to set the record straight, whether the grown-ups liked it or not. Lila walked into that main room like she owned the place, like she was the CEO coming to address the board of directors about some serious mismanagement issues. She had Mr. Patches in a death grip and her map rolled up like a scroll containing state secrets, and she marched right up to Officer Delgado's desk without so much as glancing at Sabrina or Marjorie. She looked that cop straight in the eye, and I mean straight, like she was looking into his soul and taking inventory of what she found there, and said in a voice steady as bedrock, "My mommy isn't telling the truth." The room didn't just go quiet. Quiet suggests there was still some ambient noise, maybe a phone ringing in the distance or papers rustling somewhere. No, this was that special kind of silence that happens when the universe decides to hold its breath and pay attention. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to stop their constant electrical humming. Sabrina's reaction was immediate and telling. She let out this laugh that was supposed to sound amused, but came out sounding like a car trying to start on a cold morning. "She has such an imagination," Sabrina said, her voice pitched just a little too high, a little too bright, like someone overcompensating for a lie they're telling themselves as much as everyone else. But Lila didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't retreat back into childhood like most kids would when faced with an adult's dismissal. Instead, she unrolled her crayon map and laid it flat on Officer Delgado's desk with the authority of a general presenting battle plans. "Owen is playing a hiding game," she announced, her voice carrying none of the uncertainty you'd expect from a kid making up stories. "Mommy made him practice." And that's when I saw Sabrina's face change. The practiced concern slipped for just a second, like a mask sliding down someone's nose, and underneath was something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. Not the fear of a mother whose child is missing, but the fear of someone whose carefully constructed lie is about to collapse around their ears. Officer Delgado leaned forward, his cop instincts clearly pinging on something he was hearing in Lila's voice. Kids lie all the time. About brushing their teeth, about who broke the lamp, about whether they've done their homework. But there's a specific quality to a child telling the truth about something important, a clarity that cuts through all the adult bullshit like a knife through butter. "What kind of hiding game?" he asked, his voice gentle but focused, like he was talking to a key witness instead of a second grader. Lila smoothed out her map with both hands, the way adults do with important documents, and pointed to different colored areas she'd drawn. Mommy told Owen that when Daddy wasn't looking, he should run to the gray car. Auntie Ray would take him to Trent's cabin by the lake. Then Mommy would tell everyone that Daddy lost him, and the judge would give Mommy both of us forever. My stomach felt like I'd just swallowed a bucket of ice water. Trent was Sabrina's boyfriend, the guy she'd been seeing for the past 4 months, the one she claimed was just a friend during the divorce proceedings. Ray was Trent's sister, a woman I'd met exactly once at some barbecue where she'd spent the entire time chain-smoking cigarettes and complaining about her ex-husband's alimony payments. Sabrina's face went from fake concern to stone-cold denial in about half a second. "That's ridiculous," she said, but her voice had lost that confident edge from earlier. "She's 7 years old. She doesn't understand what she's saying." Marjorie was staring holes through the table, like she could make this whole conversation disappear through the power of aggressive eye contact. Her lips had disappeared entirely, pressed together so tight they'd practically inverted themselves. But Lila wasn't done. She was just getting started. "You know what's absolutely mind-blowing about kids? How they can remember the most random, seemingly unimportant details with the precision of a Swiss watch, but somehow forget to flush the toilet 17 times in a row." Lila's standing there in front of Officer Delgado's desk like a tiny prosecutor about to deliver the closing argument that's going to send the bad guys to prison, and I can practically see the wheels turning in that brilliant little head of hers as she organizes 7 years' worth of observations into one devastating testimony. Officer Delgado leans back in his chair, not the dismissive lean back of someone who's already made up their mind, but the careful, attentive posture of a cop who's suddenly realized he might be dealing with something a lot more complicated than a simple missing kid case. His voice goes gentle but direct, the way good cops talk to witnesses who might actually have something useful to say instead of just wasting everyone's time. "Lila, how do you know all this?" he asks, and there's no condescension in his tone, no talking down to little kid bullshit. Just a professional trying to get to the truth, wherever that truth might lead him. And that's when my daughter, my brave, brilliant, absolutely fearless daughter, delivers the kind of testimony that would make seasoned detectives take notes. "Mommy practiced with Owen at Grandma's backyard," she says, her voice steady as granite. 3 times. She gave him candy when he ran fast. She told him to get low in the car seat. She said it was a secret game. 3 times. Jesus Christ. 3 times they rehearsed this kidnapping like it was a school play. I'm picturing Owen, my sweet, trusting 4-year-old, thinking he's playing some fun new game with Mommy, getting excited about candy rewards for following directions, completely oblivious to the fact that he's being trained to disappear from his father's life forever. Marjorie explodes like a defective firework, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You see? Fantasy. Pure fantasy." She's gesturing wildly with her hands, like she can somehow wave away the truth through aggressive arm movements. This child has been watching too much television, making up stories to get attention. But here's the thing about Marjorie's outburst. It's got that specific quality of panic that comes from someone who knows damn well that what they're hearing isn't fantasy at all. She's not defending her daughter out of maternal instinct. She's trying to save her own ass because she was obviously in on this whole sick scheme from day one. Lila doesn't even glance at her grandmother, doesn't flinch, doesn't back down, doesn't do any of the things kids usually do when faced with an angry adult. Instead, she reaches into her pocket and pulls out a folded piece of notebook paper, the kind with the blue lines that elementary school kids use for everything from math homework to love letters to their pets. She unfolds it carefully, smoothing out the creases like she's handling the Declaration of Independence. And there, written in purple crayon in that careful 7-year-old handwriting, are numbers. 1648, Lakeshore Road. Mommy told Owen this address lots of times, Lila explains, pointing to her purple numbers with the authority of someone presenting evidence in court. She made him say it back to her until he got it right. I remembered it because our class learned that the town was founded in 1648, so it's the same number. And right there, in that moment, watching my 7-year-old daughter connect historical facts to criminal conspiracy, I realized that this kid is going to rule the world someday. She's got the kind of mind that sees patterns where other people see chaos, that remembers details other people forget, that puts together puzzles even when she doesn't know she's solving them. Officer Delgado is already reaching for his radio, calling in the address for immediate verification. I can hear him talking to dispatch, requesting a unit to check out 1648 Lakeshore Road. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I feel like maybe, just maybe, someone in authority is actually taking this seriously instead of treating me like public enemy number one. Meanwhile, Sabrina is going through what can only be described as the 5 stages of getting caught red-handed. She's blown past denial and anger and landed somewhere between bargaining and acceptance, her face cycling through expressions like she's auditioning for a one-woman show called How to Destroy Your Life in Real Time. She starts to reach for her phone, probably to text Trent or Ray or whoever else is involved in this clusterfuck. But Delgado's hand shoots out faster than a striking snake. "I'll take that," he says, and it's not a request. Sabrina hands over her phone with the resigned expression of someone who knows the game is up, but hasn't quite figured out how to stop playing yet. That's when she tries to pull her last desperate card from the deck. "I was trying to protect them," she says, her voice taking on this wounded, martyred quality that would be Oscar-worthy if it wasn't so completely transparent. "He's been so unstable, so overwhelmed. I thought if I could just give him a break, some time to get his head together." It's a masterpiece of manipulation, really, trying to reframe kidnapping and false accusation as some kind of twisted mercy mission. Like she was doing me a favor by stealing my son and destroying my reputation. Like this whole elaborate scheme was just tough love with extra steps. But Officer Delgado isn't buying what she's selling. "Then why accuse him of selling his child for drug money?" he asks, and his voice has gone from gentle to steel-hard in about 2 seconds flat. "Why file emergency custody papers claiming he's an unfit parent? Why not just ask for help?" And that's the question that hangs in the air like smoke from a house fire, because there's no good answer to it. No way to spin this that makes Sabrina look like anything other than what she is. A woman so desperate to win that she was willing to use her own children as weapons in a war that should have ended with the divorce papers. The silence that follows is the kind that makes you realize you're witnessing history. Not world-changing history, but the kind of personal, family-destroying history that happens every day in courtrooms and police stations across America. The moment when lies collapse under their own weight and truth finally gets its day in court. Ms. Rivera appears beside me like a guardian angel in sensible shoes, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "She was very brave today," she whispers, and I look down at Lila, who's still standing by Officer Delgado's desk with her crayon map and her stuffed fox, looking like the world's smallest superhero who just saved the day through the power of paying attention and telling the truth. "She saved us," I whisper back, and for the first time since that empty swing started haunting my dreams, I actually believe we're going to be okay. You know that feeling when you're holding your breath underwater and your lungs are screaming for air, but you keep telling yourself you can hold on just a little bit longer, just one more second, and then suddenly you break the surface, and that first gulp of oxygen feels like the best thing that's ever happened to you? That's what waiting for that phone call felt like, except instead of drowning in water, I was drowning in the worst-case scenarios my brain kept serving up like a highlight reel from hell. 20 minutes. That's how long it took for Officer Delgado's radio to crackle back to life with news that would either save my sanity or completely destroy what was left of it. 20 minutes of watching Sabrina sit there like a deflated balloon, of listening to Marjorie mutter under her breath about ungrateful children and family loyalty, of trying not to stare at Lila like she was some kind of miracle in miniature while she colored quietly at Ms. Rivera's desk. 20 of the longest goddamn minutes of my life, where every second felt like an hour and every breath felt like I was borrowing time I didn't deserve. I kept thinking about Owen, my little boy who still needed help reaching the bathroom sink, and who insisted on wearing his superhero underwear because they made him run faster. Was he scared? Was he crying for his daddy? Did he understand that this wasn't actually a game, Or was he still thinking this was all some elaborate adventure that would end with hugs and juice boxes? Then Delgado's radio squawked to life like some kind of electronic angel, and the dispatcher's voice cut through my spiral of panic with words I'll remember until the day I die. Unit 72 to base. We've got a location confirmation on 1648 Lakeshore Road. 4-year-old male, matches the description, appears to be safe and unharmed. Currently with a female subject identified as Ray Harmon. Child is, eating ice cream and asking when his daddy's coming to pick him up. I swear to God, my knees went weak. Like, actually weak, like someone had just cut the puppet strings that were holding me upright. I didn't sit down in that torture chair because I wanted to. I sat down because the alternative was face-planting on the linoleum floor and giving Sabrina one last thing to use against me in whatever legal proceedings were about to rain down on her head like a biblical plague. Officer Delgado's expression softened in a way I hadn't seen since this whole nightmare started. For the first time, he was looking at me like I was a worried father instead of a potential criminal. And let me tell you, that shift in perspective felt better than winning the lottery. They found him, he said, and even though I'd heard the radio transmission, hearing those words spoken directly to me in plain English made it real in a way that radio static couldn't. Safe, I managed to croak out, because my voice had apparently decided to take a vacation right when I needed it most. Safe, Delgado confirmed. Eating ice cream like he's at a birthday party instead of the center of a kidnapping investigation. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls and legal procedures that I barely understood, but was grateful for nonetheless. Somewhere in there, Sabrina and Marjorie got to experience the joy of being read their rights. You know, that whole, you have the right to remain silent speech that sounds so much different when it's being directed at people who actually deserve it. Sabrina kept demanding a lawyer like she was some kind of mob boss instead of a suburban mom who'd just imploded her own life through sheer stupidity and spite. Marjorie, meanwhile, had switched tactics and was now playing the confused elderly woman card, acting like this was all some big misunderstanding that could be cleared up if everyone would just calm down and think rationally about the situation. But the beautiful thing about evidence is that it doesn't give a damn about your explanations or excuses. When the cops find your 4-year-old grandson at the exact address your 7-year-old granddaughter wrote down in purple crayon, there's not a whole lot of room for interpretation. That's not coincidence. That's conspiracy, and it's got both of their names written all over it in permanent ink. When they finally brought Owen back to the station, I heard him before I saw him. That laugh of his, pure joy mixed with excitement and just a touch of Sugar Rush mania, echoed down the hallway like the best song ever written. He came barreling through the door like a tiny hurricane, his face covered in what looked like chocolate ice cream from ear to ear, and yelled "Daddy," like he'd just spotted his favorite person in the entire universe. Which, to be fair, he probably had. I caught him in a hug that probably violated several laws of physics, holding him tight enough that he started squirming and giggling and complaining that I was squishing his tummy. He smelled like chocolate and grass stains, and that indefinable scent that all 4-year-olds seem to carry around with them. Part innocence, part chaos, and part pure distilled happiness. "Did you have fun at the cabin, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and normal, like this had all been some planned adventure instead of the most terrifying day of my parental life. "Ray gave me ice cream for breakfast," he announced with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just discovered the secret to eternal happiness. "And she has a dog that licks your face, and her TV has cartoons all day long." God bless the innocence of 4-year-olds. While I'd been imagining him traumatized and crying, he'd apparently been living his best life in what amounted to an all-inclusive resort for preschoolers. The kid had no idea he'd been kidnapped. As far as he was concerned, he'd just gotten an unexpected playdate with extended family and unlimited dessert privileges. Lila climbed into my other arm without being asked, fitting perfectly into the space between Owen's elbow and my heart. She was quieter than her brother, more aware of the weight of what had happened, but she was smiling in that satisfied way kids get when they know they've done something important and difficult and brave. Ms. Rivera appeared beside us again, and I swear this woman had mastered the art of being exactly where she needed to be at exactly the right moment. "She was very brave today," she said, nodding toward Lila. who was now using my shoulder as a pillow while Owen chattered about all the adventures he'd had at the mysterious cabin by the lake. "She saved us," I said, and it wasn't hyperbole or dramatic parental pride talking. It was just the truth, plain and simple. If Lila hadn't been paying attention, if she hadn't remembered that address, if she hadn't had the courage to speak up in a room full of adults who thought they knew better, I'd probably be spending the next 6 months fighting an uphill legal battle while Owen lived with his mother and learned to see me as the bad guy who'd lost him at the park. Instead, I was sitting in a police station holding both of my kids, watching my ex-wife get arrested for crimes that had actual names and actual consequences, and feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope that justice might actually exist in this screwed-up world after all. You know what's weird about the justice system? How it takes 3 months to schedule a hearing that should have happened 3 minutes after the truth came out, but then expects everyone to sit around pretending like justice delayed isn't justice denied, while lawyers get rich and kids wonder why grown-ups make everything so damn complicated. But here we were, 3 months after the worst Tuesday of my life, sitting in Judge Anika Patel's courtroom, waiting to find out whether the legal system would actually do its job, or if we'd all just been participating in an expensive game of bureaucratic theater. The courtroom looked exactly like every courtroom you've ever seen on TV, with paneling that probably cost more than my annual salary, an American flag that had seen better days, and that imposing judge's bench that's designed to make you feel about as significant as a dust mite in the grand scheme of universal justice. Judge Patel was one of those people who could make you confess to crimes you'd never committed just by looking at you over her reading glasses. And today she was looking at everyone in her courtroom like she'd already decided which way this was going to go. The evidence laid out on the prosecution's table looked like a garage sale organized by someone with serious OCD issues. Text messages between Sabrina and Trent, printed out and highlighted in yellow like a college textbook. Ray's sworn statement describing how Sabrina had told her I'd agreed to an extended weekend with Owen, which was apparently the cover story they'd cooked up to explain why my 4-year-old would suddenly appear at a cabin I'd never heard of with people I barely knew. But the piece de resistance, the smoking gun that made this whole case as open and shut as a screen door in a hurricane, was the doorbell camera footage from Marjorie's house. 3 separate videos, each one showing Owen practicing his hiding game in the backyard while Sabrina coached him like he was training for the Olympics of family destruction. In the first video, you could see Owen running from the back porch to the garden shed, crouching down low like Sabrina had taught him, while she stood there with a bag of candy like some twisted version of a dog trainer. In the second one, he's getting faster, more confident, more excited about this game that was really just kidnapping rehearsal disguised as family fun time. By the third video, the kid was practically a professional, running, hiding, staying quiet until Sabrina gave him the all-clear and rewarded him with whatever sugar-based bribe she'd brought that day. Watching those videos in that courtroom, surrounded by lawyers and court reporters, and all the official trappings of justice being served, I felt sick. Not just angry sick or frustrated sick, but physically, stomach-churningly sick at the realization that my own son had been trained to disappear from my life like it was a trick he could learn for treats. Then there were the phone logs. Page after page of calls between Sabrina, Trent, Ray, and even Marjorie, all clustered around the days leading up to Owen's disappearance. The prosecution had done their homework, mapping out this conspiracy like military strategists planning an invasion. They'd highlighted the timeline, connected the dots, and laid out a case so airtight it could have been used as evidence in a physics textbook about the impossibility of reasonable doubt. But the moment that really sealed the deal, the testimony that turned this from a he-said-she-said mess into something resembling actual justice, was when they played Lila's recorded statement. 7 years old, sitting in that child-friendly interview room with MS Rivera, speaking in that clear, unwavering voice that cuts through adult bullshit like a laser through tissue paper. They'd set up a video monitor so the whole courtroom could see her, this tiny girl with her stuffed fox and her purple crayon, methodically destroying her mother's lies with the precision of a surgeon removing cancer. She didn't stutter, didn't hesitate, didn't embellish. Just laid out the facts in chronological order like she was giving a book report on the worst family vacation ever. Mommy told Owen it was a secret game. Her voice echoed through the courtroom speakers. She said when Daddy wasn't looking, he should run to the gray car and go with Ani Ray. She practiced with him 3 times in Grandma's backyard. She gave him candy when he did it right. Sabrina's lawyer, some guy in a $1,000 suit who probably specialized in making guilty people look sympathetic, tried everything in his playbook. He painted Sabrina as a concerned mother driven to desperation by stress and confusion. He suggested that maybe this was all just a protective mother's mistake, that she was acting out of fear for her children's safety rather than malicious intent. He talked about the emotional toll of divorce, the difficulty of single parenthood, the way good people can make bad decisions when they're overwhelmed and scared. It was a masterpiece of legal tap dancing, really, taking a clear-cut case of kidnapping and false accusation and trying to spin it into some kind of tragic misunderstanding that called for sympathy rather than consequences. But here's the thing about Judge Patel that became crystal clear as this whole circus played out. She wasn't buying any of it. Not for 1 second. Her face remained expressionless throughout the lawyer's performance, like she was watching paint dry instead of listening to what was supposed to be a compelling defense of an innocent woman. When he finally finished his song and dance about stress and confusion and protective maternal instincts, Judge Patel looked at him with the kind of expression that could freeze lava. Then she looked at me, sitting there in my best thrift store suit, trying to look like a responsible father instead of a guy who'd been through 3 months of legal hell. Finally, her gaze settled on Sabrina, who was sitting at the defendant's table looking like she'd rather be literally anywhere else in the universe. "Mr. Wells," Judge Patel said, and her voice carried the authority of someone who'd been making these kinds of decisions for decades. "You protected your children even while being falsely accused of the most heinous crimes a parent can be charged with. You maintained your composure, cooperated with authorities, and trusted in the system to reveal the truth." Then she turned to Sabrina, and if looks could convict people, this one would have sent her straight to maximum security. "Ms. Turner, you weaponized your own children in what can only be described as a campaign of character assassination against their father. You traumatized your son by training him to disappear from his father's life, and you traumatized your daughter by forcing her to choose between family loyalty and telling the truth." The verdict, when it finally came, felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. Full custody to me, with Sabrina granted supervised visitation only, 2 hours every other Sunday at a family center where trained professionals could make sure she didn't try to turn parenting time into advanced kidnapping training. Marjorie was barred from any unsupervised contact with either child, which was probably the first time in her adult life that someone had told her that her opinion wasn't just wrong, but legally irrelevant. Outside the courthouse, Sabrina's brother Miles approached me with the kind of awkward shuffle that suggested he'd been rehearsing this conversation in his head for weeks. "I'm sorry," he said, and unlike most family apologies, this one sounded like he actually meant it. "If you need help with pickups or anything, just let me know." I looked at him for a long moment. This guy who'd probably spent the last 3 months watching his sister destroy herself through her own choices, and realized that not everyone in Sabrina's family was completely insane. "Trust is a bridge that gets rebuilt one plank at a time," I told him, which was probably the most philosophical thing I'd said since this whole nightmare started. He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. We both looked tired, like survivors of the same natural disaster, standing in the wreckage and trying to figure out how to move forward. You know what Hollywood gets completely wrong about trauma recovery? They show you the inspiring montage, sad music, determined faces, maybe a calendar flipping through months, while people get progressively happier and more functional until boom, everyone's fine and the credits roll with some uplifting song about overcoming adversity. Real healing isn't a montage. It's messy and slow and frustrating, and sometimes you take 3 steps backward for every 2 steps forward, and there's no soundtrack to make it all seem meaningful and profound. The first few weeks after the court decision, Owen started playing this game that made my heart break into approximately 17 different pieces every time I witnessed it. He'd disappear into closets, under beds, behind curtains, anywhere he could squeeze his 4-year-old body into a hiding spot, and then start yelling at the top of his lungs, "Found me! Found me! Daddy!" like he was announcing his location to the entire neighborhood. At first, I thought maybe he was just being a normal kid who likes hide and seek, but then I noticed the pattern. The panic in his voice if I took more than 30 seconds to find him. The way he'd cling to me afterward, like he needed physical proof that I wasn't going anywhere. The kid had been programmed to hide from his father, and now his little brain was trying to reprogram itself by making sure that every hiding game ended with Daddy finding him fast and holding him tight. That's when Dr. Chun entered our lives like some kind of child psychology superhero with a PhD and an endless supply of patience. She specialized in play therapy, which basically means she was a professional at turning psychological damage into games that actually heal instead of games that traumatize kids for life. Smart woman, probably the smartest person I'd ever met, who could have a serious conversation about therapeutic intervention while sitting cross-legged on the floor playing with toy dinosaurs. Dr. Chun taught us new games. Games where I always found Owen immediately. Games where the hiding ended with hugs and snacks so that hide and safe could live in the same mental neighborhood instead of being mortal enemies. We practiced peek-boo, even though he was way too old for it, because sometimes healing means going backward before you can go forward, and sometimes a 4-year-old needs to remember that disappearing and reappearing can be fun instead of terrifying. Lila's trauma showed up differently, like it always does with kids who process the world through their brains instead of their bodies. She started having nightmares, not the typical kid nightmares about monsters under the bed, but complex anxiety dreams about grown-ups lying and people she trusted turning out to be dangerous. She'd wake up in the middle of the night asking questions that no 7-year-old should have to ask. How do you know when adults are telling the truth? What if someone tries to take Owen again? What if I said something wrong in court? So we made a bravery wall in her bedroom. This cork board where she could tack up new words she learned that made her feel strong and capable and proud of herself. Courage was the first one, written in purple marker because purple was her power color. Then came steady, truth, safe, smart, strong, and about 50 other adjectives that turned her bedroom wall into a kind of positive affirmation art installation. Every night before bed, we'd add a new word if she wanted to, and she'd tell me about a time during the day when she'd been that word. I was brave when I told Mrs. Peterson about the kid who was picking on Marcus at recess. I was steady when Owen was crying about his scraped knee and I got him a Band-Aid. Little victories, little moments of strength that added up to a kid who was learning that she could trust herself to handle whatever came next. Meanwhile, I was dealing with my own recovery process, which mainly involved trying to build a stable life that could actually support the family I'd almost lost. The warehouse job I'd been working part-time became full-time, day shifts only because I'd learned the hard way that being available for your kids isn't optional when you're a single parent. The pay was decent, the work was honest, and nobody expected me to be anything other than a guy who showed up on time and did his job without drama. We moved out of that shoebox apartment and into a small duplex with an actual yard. Nothing fancy, just a patch of grass and a tree that was perfect for climbing once Owen got a little bigger. The rent was slightly more than I could comfortably afford, but comfort is overrated when you're talking about giving your kids space to be kids without feeling like they're living in a storage unit. Our neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Alvarez, turned out to be the kind of people who make you believe in the goodness of humanity again. Retired teachers, both of them, with grandkids scattered across 3 states and more patience with children than should be legally allowed. They adopted us without asking, showing up with homemade cookies when we moved in and somehow becoming bonus grandparents through sheer force of kindness. Mrs. Alvarez taught Lila how to garden, which appealed to her map-making brain because apparently plants grow in predictable patterns if you understand the science behind soil and sunlight and water. Mr. Alvarez taught Owen how to throw a baseball, which mostly involved chasing the ball around the yard while Owen giggled and forgot to pay attention to where it was going. Saturday morning pancakes became mandatory in our house, not because I'm some kind of domestic god who loves cooking elaborate breakfasts, but because routine gives kids something to count on when the rest of the world feels unpredictable. Lila would read recipes aloud like she was announcing the news, and Owen would insist on flipping pancakes way too early, sending batter flying across the kitchen while laughing like a maniac. Those Saturday mornings weren't perfect. Nothing about our new life was perfect, but they were ours. Messy and chaotic and filled with the kind of ordinary family moments that I'd almost lost forever because someone decided that winning was more important than loving. Sabrina showed up to exactly 2 of her court-mandated supervised visits. The first one lasted about an hour before she started arguing with the counselor about the unfairness of the restrictions and walked out in a huff. The second visit ended when she tried to quiz Owen about whether he missed living with Mommy and whether Daddy was taking good care of him, turning what was supposed to be bonding time into an interrogation session. After that, she stopped coming altogether. Just stopped. Like her children were a hobby she'd gotten bored with instead of human beings who'd spent their entire lives loving her despite everything she'd done to destroy that love. Lila asked me one evening while we were adding resilient to her bravery wall whether her mother loved them. It's the kind of question that makes you want to lie, to protect your kid from the truth that some adults are fundamentally broken in ways that have nothing to do with the children they're supposed to love unconditionally. But I'd learned that lies, even well-meaning ones, have a way of growing into bigger problems down the road. So I told her the truth, as gently as I could manage. Yes, she loves you. But sometimes grown-ups get so focused on winning that they forget what love is actually for. Lila thought about that for a minute, chewing on her bottom lip the way she does when she's processing something complicated. Finally, she said, I'm glad we don't live like that anymore. And you know what? So was I. You know what takes real guts? Going back to the place where your world fell apart and trying to make new memories that don't taste like fear and regret. 6 months after the worst Tuesday of my life, we were standing at the entrance to Riverside Green again, and I felt like a combat veteran returning to a battlefield that had been turned into a memorial park, familiar but haunted, peaceful but loaded with ghosts. The park looked exactly the same, which was somehow both comforting and unsettling. Same soccer field where college kids were still pretending to study. Same benches where the bongo guy, or maybe his spiritual successor, was tapping out rhythms that sounded like a heart trying to find its normal beat again. Same playground equipment where other people's children were having normal childhood experiences that didn't involve police stations and court proceedings. Owen took off toward the swings like a tiny missile with light-up shoes, because 4-year-olds don't really do subtle emotional processing. For him, swings meant flying and laughing and demanding to go higher until physics intervened. The kidnapping trauma had mostly worked itself out through months of therapeutic hide-and-seek and Dr. Chen's patient guidance, leaving behind a kid who was maybe a little more clingy than before, but still fundamentally convinced that the world was his personal playground. Higher, Daddy. Higher. He yelled before but even hit the swing seat, because some things never change, thank God. His legs were already pumping with the determination of someone training for the Olympics of childhood joy, and those dinosaur stickers Lila had applied to his shoes, the same ones from that terrible day, were flashing like a disco ball having the time of its life. Lila approached the monkey bars with the focused intensity of a general surveying enemy territory. She'd grown in the past 6 months, not just taller, but somehow more solid, more confident in her own skin. The nightmares had mostly stopped, replaced by a quiet strength that made her seem older than her 8 years, but not in a way that broke my heart. More like she'd learned something important about truth and justice and standing up for people you love, and that knowledge had settled into her bones like armor. She attacked those monkey bars like they owed her money, hand over hand with the same determination she'd shown in Officer Delgado's office when she'd decided to save our family through the power of purple crayon and stubborn honesty. When she made it across without falling, she turned to me with this grin that was pure triumph mixed with, "Did you see that, Daddy?" And I realized that we were really, truly okay. That's when my phone buzzed, and for just a split second, one tiny, ridiculous second, the old fear rose up in my chest like acid reflux from hell. My hand actually shook a little as I reached for the phone, muscle memory from a time when phone calls meant disaster and accusations, and watching my children disappear from my life in real time. But before I could even look at the screen, Lila called out from the monkey bars, "Dad, it's okay. We're right here." 8 years old, and she could read my anxiety like a book written in her native language. She'd noticed my reaction to the phone, understood exactly what that moment of panic meant, and responded with the kind of calm reassurance that most adults never master. It was just a text from my brother Gavin asking if we wanted to come to Sunday dinner. Nothing more dramatic than family logistics. But Lila's words hit me harder than any court verdict. We're right here. Present tense. Safe. Accounted for. not going anywhere without my knowledge and consent, not being trained to disappear by people who were supposed to love them. Just here, in this moment, being kids in a park with their dad who loved them more than his own life. I pushed Owen on that same swing where everything had gone wrong 6 months earlier, and with each push, I felt like I was reclaiming something that had been stolen from us. Higher, he demanded, because Owen's relationship with gravity is purely adversarial, and I pushed him toward the clouds while trying not to think about empty swings and unanswered phone calls in the worst hour of my parental life. You got it, Captain, I told him, using the nickname that had stuck after months of him insisting he was the captain of various imaginary vehicles, spaceships, pirate ships, the living room couch, when it transformed into a submarine during Saturday morning cartoons. Lila finished her monkey bar conquest and wandered over to lean against my arm, the way she did when she had something important to say but wanted to make sure I was really listening. She smelled like sunshine and that particular scent kids acquire after successful playground domination, part sweat, part grass stains, part pure contentment. Dad? She said, and her voice had that thoughtful quality that usually preceded profound observations about life, the universe, and why grown-ups make everything so complicated. Yes, sweetheart. I'm proud I was brave. For words, 21 letters. One sentence that packed more emotional weight than most people's doctoral dissertations. She wasn't asking for validation or fishing for compliments. She was making a statement about herself, claiming ownership of her own courage in a way that would have made warriors throughout history nod with respect. Me too, I said, and I meant it with every cell in my body. You taught me how. Because here's the thing about bravery that most people don't understand. It's not about not being scared. It's about being absolutely terrified and doing the right thing anyway, because someone you love needs you to be stronger than your fear. Lila had been scared that day in the police station. Scared of contradicting her mother, scared of not being believed, scared of the consequences of telling the truth in a room full of adults who thought they already knew how the story ended. But she'd done it anyway. She'd stood up with her stuffed fox and her purple crayon and her 7-year-old sense of justice. And she'd saved us all through the simple act of refusing to let lies win. The swing creaked with that familiar rhythm that had haunted my dreams for months, but now it just sounded like childhood again. Owen's laughter mixed with the general noise of kids being kids, and somewhere behind us, a dog was barking at absolutely nothing, the way dogs do when they're just happy to be alive and part of the world. I thought about how close we'd come to breaking, not just as a family, but as people who believed that truth mattered and justice was possible and love could win against manipulation and spite. I thought about the quiet power of a child's voice in a loud room full of adults who thought they knew better. I thought about love that doesn't compete for points or keep score, the kind of love that protects instead of possesses. Sabrina had tried to turn my kids into proof of my failure as a father and a human being. She'd weaponized their innocence, exploited their trust, and used them as ammunition in a war that should have ended with divorce papers and shared custody arrangements. She'd trained my son to disappear from my life like it was a trick he could learn for candy, and she'd put my daughter in the impossible position of choosing between family loyalty and telling the truth. But instead of breaking us, her campaign of destruction had revealed something stronger. Lila's courage, Owen's resilience, and a kind of love that refuses to be weaponized or manipulated or turned into a game with winners and losers. Standing there in Riverside Green, watching my kids be kids in the same place where everything had gone wrong, I realized that we weren't just survivors of Sabrina's scheme. We were proof that love, real love, doesn't need to destroy other people to protect what matters.